Books make you hope. Books make you dream. Books make you laugh. Books make you scream. This is the Books That Make You show, discussing books with authors and experts, unraveling the inner pages of all the books that help make us who we are.
Welcome, one and all. It is time for the Books That Make You show. I'm your host, Desiree Duffy. And today we're talking about books that make you fall in love with the illustrations as much as the story. Children's books and the magic that they weave with vibrant stories and art, they can impact our lives from very early on. And today we talk with a kids' book author and his illustrator about how they work together on the new book, Snoodles, Kidoodles, Poodles, and lots of noodles. Stephen Joseph, there it is here. His first book is the award-winning children's book, The Last Surviving Dinosaur, the TyrantoCrankaTsuris Rex. There it is. And that was the start of his crankiness journey. His second book was The Crankatsuris Method, which was a grown-up guide to effective crankiness. There we go. And he is also an award winner. He's helped adults around the world embrace their crankiness. And now his third book is Snoodles, Kidoodles, Poodles, and lots of noodles. And he seeks to inspire kids, parents, educators everywhere that are still maybe feeling, a little bit cranky. And Andy Case is here. He is an internationally published children's book illustrator and cartoonist. Now, Andy has over 30 years experience working professionally in illustration, and he's been commissioned and distributed by book publishers, record labels, magazines in many different countries. His bright and colorful art is deeply stylized, and it really engages young readers and learners, and it helps bring stories to life. We're going to talk to these two gentlemen in just a moment. But first, I want to give a big thank you to Novelty Tins and the amazing teas that they produce in these literary tea tins. Yes, these are not books. These are tea tins. They do such a magnificent job. And their tea is really tasty. It's really yummy. I know Stephen has had some before. So check out noveltytins.com. Gentlemen, hello. Thank you for joining me today. How you doing?
Good.
Yeah, really good. Thank you.
All right, let's start with the backstory, if you would indulge me, because I talk to a lot of authors of children's books, and in some cases they're matched with their illustrator. In some cases, they're working together from the very beginning. How did you guys meet and start working together?
Well, we didn't meet till the second book. So there was the first book, The Last Surviving Dinosaur, the TyrantoCrankaTsuris. And I went through Mascot Books. They're my publisher. And I knew nothing about illustrators, or I was even asking people around, an illustrator. But they told me that they could show me about 75, 80, 90 illustrators. So they sent me the material of a whole group of illustrators. And I already had in my mind what I was looking for, like something a little wacky and loud. I'm a New Yorker, so it's just, I guess it happens. So out of the 75, they say, pick the three you like the best. And Andy was one of the three. And then once I got the three finalists, so to speak, I got a lot more material. And Andy was like the slam dunker out of the three. It wasn't even like, it wasn't close. It was just, okay, Andy. And the thing about that because I was new and I really didn't, I'm just following what people tell me. I never even interacted with Andy on the whole process. I just went through my publisher, and then the publisher went to Andy, and if I had a question on the picture. And when I got this story, before I went to Mascot, I actually looked up Andy online, so he had an email address, so I contacted him directly. And that was way more fun. It's way more fun working with Andy than around with the publisher. So we started on this, and I reached out to the publisher. I actually had two books in mind, and they thought this was one that they wanted to go with. So that's how we started.
And Andy, I kind of feel like we're talking about a couple. What was it like when you first experienced Steve and Joseph? Because it almost feels like a dating app, right? I looked at all of these different choices. Andy was the hottest one. But Andy, can you give us your view? How did it go for you?
Well, it's pretty unusual to actually communicate with the author. Usually you do go through publishers. You have a very strict timescale. That was the case with The Last Surviving Dinosaur. I didn't speak to Stephen at all. I went through a very set process, and by the end, the book was finished. But that puts you in a little bit of a box. But by Stephen coming directly to me, it created a whole different relationship. I wasn't so defined by this time scale. What I could do is start fleshing out the book even more, start thinking of what is this world that Stephen's created. So it took a lot longer than usual, but I ended up doing 5-6 times the amount of work that I usually do on a book. So by having that kind of direct communication, it was really interesting and it became really valuable. I would be sending him just ideas of things that you would see in the book, but it'd be really like just in the background. And then it would flesh new characters out and this world started to appear. So I found it really rewarding, to be honest.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so why do you think it is, Andy? Because you've worked with so many different children's book authors working directly with the publisher. Why do you think it is that they keep you a little bit apart from that process?
Control, probably. But also, they're almost like a management team working with different, almost freelancers to create a whole. So it almost creates a hub, I would say. I'm a freelancer working for them. Stephen effectively is a freelancer, use his skills. So they need to be able to coordinate it. And we did go off at a time scale. It did take months longer than it normally would do. And I think from a publisher's point of view, if they're trying to get books through on a time scale, it's not good that the author and the illustrator talk, because then we start getting ideas and the thing starts exploding, which is kind of what happened with this book.
Yeah. Oh no, those new inventive ideas. We can't have anything extra creative. But
yeah, the problem with these ideas is that you end up going off on a tangent. The book, which was at its core delivered to a publisher, becomes something completely different because you've chatted about it too much. So
but I think that's what gives it its je ne sais quoi, because it is so unique now, and so the illustrations are just so different than what you usually expect. Do you feel like it made the book and everything better?
It's the best book I've ever done. It's the best book ever. It's the most interesting, inventive book I've ever worked on. Because everyone says they can write a children's book, and I get a lot of them sent to me, and some of them are okay. This was truly inventive. This was something I'd never seen or even thought of before. The idea of food moving automobiles and this whole world. I did so much research on noodles. I'm an expert on noodles.
All right, let's jump over to Stephen. So why don't you tell us the story a little bit? Because people are like, what, noodles and poodles? Like, can you give us a little bit of the backstory of?
And he's going to make me cry. I have to keep tears, just stop crying. But it's emotional. It's just like having an effect and doing this and bring for Andy to bring something that I created to life. It's an emotional experience, and it's just like I get all choked up. But yeah, the story is actually it's almost like taken out of the pandemic when you just have people and like everybody's polarized and with vaccines or no vaccines and everybody just would be right on crankiness. Like it's always getting worse. Everything's going downhill. It's the country's going into the tubes, sort of thing. So I like writing uplifting things. So I turned crankiness around to make it fun. So that's what I was doing in my adult book. Embracing crankiness. So this was a story instead of like a virus. People are just driving around in a krautmobile, which is run on sauerkraut, And I do not like kimchi sauerkraut. Just like there was jars. I've been with people who had kimchi sour, and it just stinks. So I already had that in my head. It's just like, oh God, it's just that smelly stuff. So I had that in my head, and in my day job, I'm an attorney, and I'm just very busy, and I had to take on this whole big project. And it was just, I was just sleeping at night where I barely scratched the surface. So that whole thing came together in my head. It was like a Saturday morning. It's just how it just plopped in my head. And then I just wrote the story that afternoon. And what I do, I run marathons. So I'm a long distance runner. So it's fun when you go out for a long run. Especially characters start talking to me, and I just watch them. I'm not doing anything. They're just like talking, chatting away, and or they're doing things. So it just gets more fleshed out. And then I come home. I do shower first, and that's always important. But then afterwards, I start writing the story and then it came out, and it's like, oh, that this could be a good kid's story.
Mm-hmm. And as far as the characters, and I'm curious, Andy, when you were developing these characters, because they were talking to Stephen, and I hear that a lot from authors, that's a very common thing, that the characters almost demand that you listen to them so that you can write about them. But then, Andy, what was it like then taking those characters and giving them, a look and a feel? What was that like?
It was, well, by the time we got all the characters fleshed out, it was fun because then you could create the world. But getting them to start with, it was interesting where the cultural difference came between the USA and the UK, because the Sour Crudelman is a dodgy car dealer. So Stephen was thinking more kind of Danny DeVito in Taxi, which I've not really watched. But I was thinking more Boise in Only Fools and Horses, who is a used car dealer. In the UK, dodgy car dealers are suited and booted. That's why you don't trust them. So I did this dodgy car salesman in this like 3-piece suit. And it was like, no, he looks like the smartest gent in the entire village. It was like, oh, okay. So I had to start really researching kind of what would these characters look like. This is an imaginary place, but it's got elements of New York about it. It's got the deli, New York. I put other areas, all the American cities, I kind of looked at that as well. So creating the characters, they had to fit in with their world. So we had a lot of communication. I'd send a lot more drafts off, some colour ideas. What do you think about this character, that character? And Stephen would really guide me on all of this. He had a very clear idea in his head. So, sorry, Stephen.
Yeah, I had to tell you, Sour Crudelman definitely had to have a deli feel to him. And I grew up in New York. My parents would take me shopping to the Lower East Side in Manhattan because they could save on taxes and they could bargain. And my mother would talk with the salespeople in Yiddish. And they would always take me to Katz's Delicatessen and get this giant deli pastrami sandwich. And also there's a street in the Lower East Side. It's just a pickle store where barrels and barrels and barrels of pickles, and they're all outside on the street. And you just smell like all the pickles, where it makes you just want another deli sandwich. So I was even kidding with Andy, like the next book, if there's another book, the pickle mobile takes off, but everybody's like, you wake up in the morning and you're shoving pastrami sandwiches in your mouth. But of course, that wouldn't be too healthy. I think Noodles is a little bit healthier. So
a little bit. Well, it depends what you put on those noodles, right?
Yes, that's true.
And I love the fact that, okay, you're making me very hungry. Thank you for putting the pastrami sandwich in my head, because now I have to have one. But when it comes to, that's one of the great things about books, is it brings us into the moment, right? So when you're writing this and you've got all these food and character elements, I'll start with you, Andy. Can you talk about, bringing that to the page and what it was like in, bringing the idea of this is food, this is visceral, appealing to people's senses, so to speak, when you're illustrating it. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think each character needs to react to the senses, just like you said. So I've got lots of characters smelling the Snoodle-mobile as it goes by. I tried to incorporate characters in every page where the Snoodle-mobile was driving. You'd see a character smelling it and going, this is amazing. But I think I had to create each bit individually. Everything you see on the page has been created individually. So therefore I did 6 or 7 different drafts of each page before I chose the final one, which made me kind of think about these characters in a lot more detail. I wanted to kind of, what would be the reaction where the Krautmobile is being driven predominantly? So I was thinking it's going to be dirty. There's going to be a certain type of characterization for the characters who live in that world. I was thinking kind of like London, which used to have a real bad pollution problem. So I was thinking of people in London and people in Beijing and other. So I did lots of research. It's interesting when Stephen talks about Cat's Diner, because we had a conversation over email and that came up. So I went and for the deli scene, looked at that very diner. I tried to bring out core credentials of that diner, so it had an element of reality, even though it was in a different world.
Yeah. And Stephen, do you want to talk a little bit about, because you do, and even talking to you, I remember talking to you when this book was still, if you excuse the expression, noodling in your head, because you were talking about sauerkraut and it being stinky. So talk a little bit about when you were writing it, weaving in the elements of smell and taste and everything. How important was that in writing the book?
It was important, just that because I was writing. At first, it was a blog post, or I write stories on crankiness, and just the concept of like smells, and even in my Grownup Guide to Effective Crankiness, I have a chapter that talks about, 2 chapters. One chapter talks about potato latkes, and I happen to make the best potato latkes in the world. So I wrote a chapter, but the smell, it was growing up. My mother would make the latkes, and you're sitting and you just want to eat the latkes. When is dinner? Can I just have one? And latkes are best when they just come off the stove and they're really hot and crispy. So I wrote a chapter about that. The other chapter was a different chapter. I used to be heavy. I used to be like 240, and I lost 85 pounds in like 5 months. And I was eating pastrami, chopped liver, triple-decker sandwiches every day. And this was after law school, where I was just eating, cooking. Tuesday night was import night, where I would drink stouts and bags of potato chips and beer nuts. And so food is this kind of a like addictive thing, but it also smells is something that helps with crankiness, that you smell something delicious and you can't really be cranky. So I had the concept of noodles in my head, and then all of a sudden I had the noodles. Oh wow, so many words rhyme with noodles, like poodles, and then I could have a snoodle. That could be the car that runs. So everything started flowing, but it's all just because of the crankiness, and then everything just started taking off.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And talk a little bit, and we can touch on your blog too, because you write your blog, and that in many ways inspires the books that you write. And I'll give you a chance to give your blog a shout out in a little bit. But talk a little bit about the actual words, because when I read your book, it's like I'm reading a tongue twister. It's fun to read. And that's something for kids and teachers and parents. Like, this book is something that they're going to enjoy reading for the sake of reading, right?
Yeah. I keep saying, try saying Snoodles, Kidoodles, Poodles, and lots of noodles 5 times fast. And it's fun, and it takes you into different worlds. And which Andy does amazing job, where there's the people fighting in front of the Bronx Botanical Gardens, and just so you're in that world. There's the like, it's almost like a carnival amusement park feel to the picture with the food emporium, noodle related food emporiums with the noodle museum in the background. And then you're inside the museum. That's a different world. We're inside a museum like, you get to notice the different works of art, the illustrations. Some illustrator, it's Andy, who did these beautiful paintings with inside the paintings, and then just you're in this art restoration studio. So you're in another world where with the Poodles and these adorable poodles. Well, one poodle, Snoodle, the poodle, and who happens to like sauerkraut. So the Snoodles there, and then you end up at the end of this story at Sauer Krudelman's Delicatessen. So it's just it takes you from one world. It keeps being very active, and it's over the top, and even like the world of Halloween, where that's so much fun. This is what happens where, like, the working together with Andy. So there was Andy, of course, he does the Halloween scene where everybody's wearing different costumes. There's a couple of the kids with the Sauer Krudelman costume. And I said, how about if every single kid had the Sauer Krudelman costume? So Andy did it. And it looks it's so hysterical. Imagine if every kid had the exact same Halloween costume, what it would look like. It's so ridiculous. Like you go out and see usually you see how interesting it is when I used to take my daughter trick-or-treating and kids wearing the different creative costumes. And you say, wow, that's so creative. Oh, wow, that's interesting. Oh, I've never seen that one. But it was even more funny that every single person decided to wear Sauer Krudelman. Yeah. It was so funny, and Andy did it so perfectly, and I'm going to cry again. So anyway.
Oh, I can't find that page right off the top here, but I did want to just say, you see me kind of flipping through and holding stuff up. I know I'm not doing the art justice on the screen here, and for those people who are listening to the podcast or listening to the radio show, this is why you should. There you go. Thank you. This is why we should make sure that we are watching the YouTube version of the show too. Andy, I can't help but notice in a lot of ways, the panels that you're drawing, it reminds me of a comic book. Now, was that an intentional thing that you did it almost pseudo comic book style?
I think so. Usually I keep the two separate. So I do my cartooning, and then children's books have a different feel to it. But there was so much in this book. It was like, how am I going to capture all of this in one page? So at some point it would be like when we had all the noodle restaurants and the noodle museum, that was a big spread, and that was fine. But I thought I wanted to show that it was a real lively, pacey interludes, especially when Sauer Krudelman's breaking into the noodle museum. So in my head, I saw him do it step by step. And it's like, well, this is just a comic strip. It should be almost like a multimedia book, not just illustrations, but have lots of kind of a bit of Where's Wally in it, where you're discovering things maybe on the third time that you've read it. And then we have these comic strips which kind of almost illustrate the story in a different way for you. So, yeah, it just spoke to me doing it that way. And when I suggested this to Stephen, because it's a little bit out of the ordinary, that's where the benefit of being able just to email and go, what do you think of this crazy idea? But Stephen was really on board with it. So I thought, oh, do you know what? Let's try it. And we ended up putting 2 separate little comic strips in it. And I really think they added value to the book, because it's very hard to show PM McDoodles or, the art restoration's kind of passage of desperation. And that really came to me when I was reading that bit. I really wanted to show how he'd gone from normal, confident and arrogant to absolutely past that at its wit's end. And for me, it felt like 5-6 different images.
Yeah.
So I ended up doing that. And I think it worked really well.
Yeah. And that's a good point you bring up too, because the characters are changing. There is an arc to them. The story here is powerful in the fact that it goes a little bit deeper than what one might find in a typical children's book, and elements of being aware and helping the environment, for example, I think is a theme that's in the writing that comes out too. Yeah. You want to talk a little bit about, just the overall arching message of the book?
I've always, in terms of the characters, I've always felt that Sour Crudamon was the protagonist of the story, because he was the one who went through the most obvious character arc, but it was hidden behind the wonder of the Snoodlemobiles. So that was really funny, because the main character is successful all the way through, even when he has a stumble and has to get it repaired. It is repaired and is open again. He's just success all the way through, where Sour Crudamon starts off being vilified. He's vilified in the Halloween scene. When you look at some of the newspapers, you'll see little stories which showcase just what a failure Sour Crudamon is, just compared to there's other guys on the Time magazine, and Sour Crudamon was like, everything is going wrong, and then he can't sell his cars for nothing, and then he goes insane and tries to take all his fury out on the noodle Lisa, but then suddenly recovers himself and goes, do you know what? There's a different path. And then he starts on the Picklemobile and he opens up the cafe and the deli, and he's got, he becomes a better person at the end of it. And that's just, when you read these stories, and they're read to kids, so it's a relationship between parent and child. So a parent's going to understand all the hidden messages, but the kids will get a kind of indication from the pictures as well. They'll be talking about, why do we have pollution? Isn't it better to use different ways of using energy or making our technology work? Should we be better people? Is it right to destroy or deface art? That's quite topical at the moment. Mm-hmm. So there's all these different layers. It's a multi-layered book, and the title just grabs you initially. I mean, that's what a crazy title. That's got to be read, and after that, it's not kind of throwing it in your face. It's very subtle, all of the messages, but you do definitely leave with all the messages and a conversation in your head.
Yeah. Stephen, do you want to talk about the deeper messaging and the theme of the book?
The messaging, one thing I always think is important is make the world a better place. How we could do that. In Judaism, there's this phrase Tikkun Olam, healing the world, and it's like each person's obligation to heal the world. So that's something I do think about, with the writing. So here's they're making the world a better place, and then also the optimism that, hey, things could get better. Not everything but we need to work. We need to be creative, and if we could use our creativity, get up and do it, then maybe we can make the world a better place. So that's what I think about when I'm writing something. A lot of my writing is like having a voice. So in the Last Surviving Dinosaur, the TyrantoCrankaTsuris, it's the smallest dinosaur, but she uses her voice to make the bigger, badder dinosaurs disappear. And I find that interesting now because of the war in Ukraine. where it's like almost like a parallel wish story, with that, even though obviously wasn't meant to be that. I was in that book. My mother's a concentration camp survivor, so and she had passed away, and I had her voice in my head when I wrote that story. But again, so those are things I think about when I'm writing, like being optimistic, making the world a better place, having a voice. Those are things that like I focus in on.
And those are powerful messages to have. So, okay, we're running up against the clock, but I want to ask, are you guys going to be working together again in the future? Are we going to see another book from the two of you soon?
Well, we've been talking about it, and I do have, like I've written the story like on Cinderella, or like I call Ella and the Froggy Prince, or whatever we want to call it. But in that story, Cinderella doesn't get the dress, she gets a megaphone, and she uses her voice at the end and she ends up with the prince, of course. But she uses her voice. It's not about the dress and the chariot, and also how they were actually the prince and Cinderella was like having like a pen pal relationship online writing. So. It wasn't even about what she looked like, that the prince was so interested in Cinderella, and his parents wanted him to marry Snow White. Like, why can't you marry? She's and they dated. The prince and Snow White dated. Yeah. So but she lives with 7 little men, and
and she sleeps a lot. She just kind of lays around. She's not have a lot of fun.
What I love about this idea is that these are questions that kids would ask. When you're reading them fairy stories, they would ask these questions and you'd be put on the spot. Yeah. That's what I really like about this idea.
So Andy, what do you think about working with Stephen again?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I said to him I'd do it for free.
No.
Wow.
No.
Dang.
No. I would do it for free, without a doubt.
All right. Well, we've got to wrap things up, gentlemen, but I want to give you a chance really quick. Andy, I'll start with you. Can you tell people where they can find out more about you and your artwork and everything that you're doing? Can you give us your details?
Yes, I'm on Instagram, Andy Case Illustration. I'm also have a website, andycasestudios.com. That's about it. I keep myself to myself. If you want me, email me.
All right.
Have a nice life.
He's the reclusive artist. It's like, I'm going to sit here and draw. Don't really talk to me or look at me. Stephen, you are not so reclusive. Your blog, for example, is hilarious. I mean, even beyond the children's books, the things that you write about just make me laugh every day. Can you tell people where to find your website, your blog, more details about you?
The blog is on the website. It's www.stephenjosephauthor.com.
Perfect. And we have Snoodles, Kidoodles, Poodles, and lots of noodles, which people can find Amazon and every place that fine books are sold. Mascot, too. I believe they have it on their website, if I'm not mistaken. Andy Case, Stephen Joseph, thank you guys for being here today.
Thank you.
And thank you, everybody. Thank you for listening to the Books That Make You show today. You can find out more about us on our website. That is booksthatmakeyou.com. We're also on TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram. Until next time, all of my bookish buddies, please enjoy all of the books that make you exactly who you are.
The host and executive producer of the Books That Make You show is Desiree Duffy. Sound mastering and engineering by Dave Napox. Social media and content promotion by Siddhi Jahagirdar. Copywriting and editing by Mike Robinson. The Books That Make You show is an award-winning podcast produced by Black Chateau Enterprises.